All right. Well, thanks so much for being here, guys. I am actually going to let you all introduce yourselves just real quick. Tell us your name, the company you're with, and why you're excited about the future of tech. And here's your challenge, a minute or less, real quick.
Hi, my name's Ken Hepburn. I'm with Daiquiri. We're doing the smart helmet, as we like to call it. And the thing that really excites me about it is I think this is the first time that data and technology is coming out of the office and off of the desktop in a meaningful way that empowers workers to make the right decision. I mean, nobody really wants to screw up after all. And it actually can help save people's lives. So that's what's exciting for me.
You did keep it under a minute. My name's Kevin Carr. I'm with a company by the name of Master Graphics. We offer 3D printing and 3D scanning solutions. And really what I'm excited about is you take all like data in this disruptive technology. It's creating new markets, new spaces. Look at Techweek out there. And I think if you look at all the technologies that everyone's bringing up here, the exciting thing is it's disrupting the way we live, the way we work. And I think that's the cool part because there's new markets, new businesses. And really that's the exciting thing is the way we're evolving, just even as a country and doing some very exciting things.
Hi, my name is Adebayo Onibanjo. I'm with a company called Zebra Technologies. Some folks might know it. It's a 40-year-old Chicago-based company. And what really excites us is we've seen the evolution. We've seen when just simple barcode labels could tell you, oh, this is an asset, to now when that asset can actually tell you its condition, its location, its history, and being able to harness all that data to create a whole new experience and a whole new world is kind of really exciting for us.
Hello, my name is Chris Wilson. I'm an energy control engineer for Positive Energy Practice. We're an engineering consulting firm here in Chicago, mainly doing new developments, new construction, urban planning, and existing building retrofits. So what we're really excited about is where technology is in our space. Traditionally, AEC is, the adoption of technology. We're a little bit behind the curve, and it's exciting because there's so much innovation going on around energy efficiency and really efficiencies of operations of the built environment. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
My name is George Matos. I'm with Blue Marble 3D, and we're basically a design visualization and consulting company. We're basically looking at all the tools that we're going to kind of talk about here, but we're using it with our clients and our designers to show things before they're built, and they're using it in real time to help the design process and lower the construction time and cost.
I'm Shane Scranton, the CEO of Iris VR, and we are building a suite of products for virtual reality, specifically within architecture and engineering and construction. We're taking native 3D CAD files that designers use and bring them into virtual reality in one click. And what I'm really excited about is this new wave of technology that is mobile, is consumer-driven, and measures our space, whether it's a 3D scanner or whether it's a virtual reality headset that shows us 3D in a new way and in a very realistic way.
All right, great, guys. Thanks so much. Well, I know you guys, some of you talked a little bit about what you do and what your company does. Got some answers on what you're excited about for the future of technology. Why don't we take a few minutes and each of you just talk a few minutes about your company and kind of your piece of the market in the technology space. Go ahead, Ken. Start us off.
So at Daiquiri, we've been doing augmented reality for about 5 years or so and had started focusing a few years back on the industrial aspects of it. We just didn't see the consumer play. It wasn't like people were sitting there reading their People magazine at home and pounding their fist on the table, wondering where their augmented reality was. So we realized the opportunity actually to be able to drive ROI and really drive kind of a revolution in the way people work was in the industrial processes. So we've been working on that for a while. The company shifted a while back to focus exclusively on that. We're no longer doing any sort of media or entertainment applications. And one of the things that's very exciting for me in focusing on AEC, which I'm nearly doing exclusively at Daiquiri, is the fact that in the last 15 years, technology has created a 100% increase in efficiencies in manufacturing, as represented by the dollar value contributed per employee to an organization. During that same 15 years, there's been a 20% decrease inefficiencies in construction. And I think that's actually really, really phenomenal. And I think we're just sitting at the cusp of a time where technology can now actually start driving these efficiencies. One of the things that I also mentioned a little while ago is safety. And that's actually really huge. In fact, it was just a couple weeks ago that I was talking to a few guys from a very well-known training group that trains a specific vertical of construction. And they mentioned to me that there were 3 fatal accidents that had occurred just in the last 2 months that could have been easily prevented with our technology. And that's something that's really exciting. And that's where you're actually really changing people's lives. One of the things that's very interesting about safety as well is not only is there, of course, a tremendous emotional cost and physical cost to families who are dealing with this directly, but also for the companies where this may happen. And a construction company now has to submit a safety portfolio as part of the bid process, and that is something that's really phenomenal. So our product, the Daiquiri Smart Helmet, has incredible different ways that it can improve worker safety, a lot of which are happening just completely passively, and that's something that I'm super excited about.
Awesome, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. So again, my name's Kevin Carr. I work for a company by the name of Master Graphics, and we handle 3D printing and 3D scanning technology. And it's kind of interesting. And the 3D printing space, if you take the AEC, it's really had a very limited impact, right? It's only been used really for modeling. It's been primarily used in the manufacturing space for prototyping and really in the hobbyist space. So I think that impact is going to happen in the future in a couple ways. You are going to see where there's functional parts being printed. So think of prefabrication. As Ken was saying, there's a lot of inefficiency in building buildings. And you're going to see a lot more prefabrication. And I think 3D printing in the future, and I encourage you to go out and look at some technology coming out from HP, will create functional parts that we can use. And the other thing will probably affect is at some point in our homes, 3D printing will be used. And I don't think in the realm of maker bots and that, but more like printing medicines and braces and that. So it is really interesting. The 3D printing has not had an effect really on the build environment. In fact, from an overall revenue, 3D printing is only $2 billion a year. iPhone shipped $18 billion, or $18 billion in a quarter. So it really shows that it hasn't really truly been disruptive. But the one technology that I think is immediately disruptive is scanning technology. So if you look at today, there's very great high-resolution scanners that we can bring to a job site using tripod scanners. Bring that data back to things such as Daiquiri and Oculus. And then you are also improving this. The hardware is changing. We're going to have the ability to scan using our iPads and our iPhones. And as I mentioned, it's all about data is disrupting our world. So now on the job site or in existing conditions, we're going to be able to take that and send that without physically visiting and get dimensional, accuracy and be able to work off that model. So I think in the next 2 years, where scanning is really going to affect, it's going to drive all these technologies that these guys are developing and girls, because it's all about data and how we use that. And you're going to see some really big advancements in the scanning, hardware as well as the software over the next 2 years.
Kevin, thanks so much. And you mentioned Oculus. Would one of the panelists be willing to kind of share what Oculus is for those of us that aren't familiar with it?
Yes, I can do that. It'll be on a slide when I talk about what we're doing, but Oculus is a head-mounted display. It has 2 lenses on it and an HD screen behind it. And when you put on the goggles, your eyes combine the image it sees through these lenses, and you get a sense of depth. And that is hard to describe in words, and it's hard to show on a screen. It's really experiential, and when you guys have a chance, there's a couple Oculuses out in the demo hall, including one at the Built Worlds booth. You'll see that when you put on the goggles, it tracks your head motion, and you actually feel like you're standing somewhere else.
Thanks, Shane. All right, Adebayo, let's get back to you, and will you share what Zebra does?
Okay. So Zebra, like I said, it's a 40-year-old Chicago-based company, and we think of ourselves as providing 3 key things, right? So we simplify operations for our partners and customers. We also enable them to know what's going on with their business and their customers, as well as empowering their workforce. So if you think about the technologies we provide, it's really been mainstream industrial. And so we talk from simple barcode label, knowing where an asset is, knowing what is in that asset, to now where we're tracking NFL players in real time, knowing exactly how fast they're going, giving sub 6 inches accuracy, and pulling that data into broadcast. So if you think about all the trends that we're talking about mobile, we're talking about cloud, and we're talking about the Internet of Things. Those three fundamental things is really what's driving this change that we're seeing. So individual components, be it the scanning equipment, we've been doing scanning in retail. Now, how do you take that scanning with 3D technology into a build site environment? And so you can give real-time information that not only empowers, a smart helmet like DACA, but other systems that exist in there. So people now have real-time information in a real critical time where they can make instant decisions. So Zebra is really just now trying to pull all that information together, all the technologies, trying to put a layer on top of it that really makes it easy to pull that information via APIs, which is application programming interface, into front-end applications. So whatever that experience you want to create.
Great, thanks. All right, Chris.
Hello. So Positive Energy Practice, like I said before, we're an engineering consulting firm here in Chicago. We're focused on providing integrated professional services for building and city projects internationally. So we play in 3 major market segments: new construction, new development, urban planning, and urban development on a larger scale, as well as existing buildings. So, as other panelists have mentioned, this is a really exciting time because of all the innovation that's going on with the technology. Existing buildings is one of my focus points, and from an integrated professional services standpoint, we're utilizing and leveraging data within these buildings to give us really vital signs of what's going on with the health and status of these buildings, and it's amazing because we're providing. One of our mission statements is really around energy efficiency and energy generation potential within the built environment. And knowing exactly what's going on with certain systems and siloed areas of the buildings is really providing us with enough information back to the client, and we're providing these extra services, and it's amazing. So, beyond energy efficiency and energy generation potential, we're really focused on improving our urban landscape through data-driven master plans. Until today, I was under the impression that we were using best-in-class technology to provide, solutions. But when I see, virtual reality taking place on the architecture side and engineering side, it's just so exciting because we're not even using that yet, and we think that we're on the cutting and bleeding edge of really where we're at. So, the company was founded in 2010 based upon a vision for a sustainable future, and we're committed to providing designs and delivering, environmentally responsible solutions to bring our communities into the future.
Thanks. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so probably the easier thing for me to describe is if you guys look up here at the photos we've got, it'll help describe kind of the virtual reality and augmented reality. So a key thing that we found 2 years ago when we formed Blue Marble 3D was that visualization as a whole and the data points that everybody is talking about is it's a new way to help design, and it's a new way to help a client understand what they're going to look at. Instead of traditional plans, even using 3D modeling, it's still a flat surface. When we can actually take things and project them out and people can see them as if they're in the real space, their mind tends to change dramatically as to what they're feeling and thinking. So a couple examples that'll be easier to talk about, but on the left here is the Chicago Blackhawks. We won the cup here, but we actually designed their store on Michigan Avenue, and we actually had the executive team in, and they walked through the store before it was built, so they had an understanding of what it was, because the old store was about 800 square feet, and we went to about 5,000. So there were a lot of elements we put in there, technology-wise as well. There's a picture of a cube up in the middle there. And technically a cube or a cave, that's the virtual reality, has been around for 20 plus years, but it's not used in the construction industry typically. Oil, gas, aerospace use it. We're the first ones to kind of bring it to the construction industry, and we're trying to show, look at your space before it's done so you can figure out these mistakes. And we've done that a couple times, and they've been significant savings for the clients. The Oculus headset, Steve will talk more about, but you can see that in the upper corner. That's more of a portable system versus a physical cube or cave. But I think the key thing is that everybody keeps talking about here is the data. It's taking that data and trying to show it in a different way that the client understands, the designers understand, than the traditional way that we're doing things.
All right, thanks, George. And I've seen some of the renderings your company's done, and they're just really impressive. I mean, they look completely real. I wouldn't have been able to tell that they're renderings otherwise, so it's exciting to hear what you guys are doing. All right, Shane, why don't you tell us about Iris VR?
Absolutely. So Iris has had sort of an interesting start. We're about a year and a half old, and that's about the age of the Oculus Rift and consumer-grade virtual reality, let's call it. And we started because I studied architecture, and my co-founder had studied math and physics, and we tried on the goggles like right after school. And I said, hey, Nate, like this is potentially a way that, like you guys have said as well, it's a way to show space that isn't a floor plan, that isn't necessarily a flat rendering. It's a way to actually walk through something that isn't built. And this seems like a powerful way to communicate something that's unbuilt and something that in theory costs millions and millions of dollars. A very early firm we talked to was building a hospital and was talking about how the change order to move a sink in a emergency room costs, at least $30,000, and the ability to actually walk through before something is built has a huge potential to actually save money and save time. So from there, our big question was, is this a process that we need to do by hand every time to make a virtual reality walkthrough? You essentially need to make a video game. Virtual reality is kind of funny because it requires that it's navigable, so you can walk through a space. And really the only way to do that is in a video game engine. And as you can imagine, architects and engineers and general contractors, they don't know how to make video games. They don't even know where to start to go down that road. And it requires a deep understanding of how 3D works, how mesh works, which is sort of how 3D draws things. And at the end of the day, we thought, is there a way we can actually create software, sort of like a Photoshop or a Squarespace, that can automate a lot of that for the user themselves? So where we've landed and where we are today is it's still in prototype, it's still in alpha, but it allows the designers, it allows a contractor, it allows anyone who's non-technical to take their 3D files they already have and put them into a virtual environment without using a consultant. So the result is you don't get, like what George showed was incredibly photorealistic and quite beautiful. You don't get that with our software. You get something very schematic and you get something very unfinished. So we're really rallying on doing more schematic workflows and showing really early stage design. And then something like Blue Marble can come in and show more end stage finalized renderings. And we think there's space for both. And it's a great way to actually show early stage design and get an understanding of it. And then in the last minute, I'll also talk about our primary challenges are very low level. We have a very technical team right now of 6 low-level programmers that are working on getting these 3D files, reading essentially what's in them, and putting them into a game engine. And essentially that's programming for a real-time engine, and I'm sure that's something we'll talk more about a little later.
All right, Shane, thanks for sharing. So we've heard about these awesome companies and kind of what's out there. I know, just high level, 50,000 foot view, maybe if a couple of you could take a stab at this question. With technology today, how are you seeing what you're doing impacting the marketplace and influencing the built environment today?
So I can talk on the kind of the virtual reality side. That's the biggest thing. We're seeing a difference in typically like hospitals, even can you guys go back a slide just to make it a little easier?
I can actually. Let me
But hospitals and even large spaces, typically what these guys do, even home decor sites and things, they typically do mock-ups. And these mock-ups cost a lot of money. So a couple case points we have is that middle image up there, you're standing on a 4th floor balcony of a hotel, and there's a chandelier. That's kind of what those white vertical pieces are. That was a $250,000 chandelier, and the owner of the property came in along with Hyatt And they basically walked through the space. We kind of took them each floor and showed them everything. And the key function of this was that chandelier. And basically we went through everything, and they were typically looking at it the traditional way, through drawings, flat elevations, and renderings. When they went into the cube and they actually looked at it, we went up to the highest floor and looked down, and the chandelier looked much smaller than they were anticipating. So because of that exercise, the chandelier actually grew 2 stories. And that would have been a $250,000 mistake they wouldn't have fixed. On the hospital side, they typically do physical mock-ups. Restaurants do this as well, and we've done it with a couple restaurants clients. They're only doing a small section of something, and the problem is typically they build the mock-up once, and then it's done. So the design can change later, but they're not going to redo the mock-up. Where we can do the mock-up virtually, and you can move things, week 1, 2 weeks later we need to change some finishes or move some things, we can do that at a fraction of the cost. So I think in the case of, in the high level, is we're trying to get people to shift from traditional way of doing things to the new technical way that can speed time and cost up and save people a lot of money basically on the jobs. And we've done that with various clients, hospitals, hotels, and restaurants.
Okay, great.
Something that I'd like to say in terms of impact in the marketplace, and I don't know if we can pull up that slide again, but one of the things that's interesting on the slide, maybe it's not going to come up there on the daiquiri slide, is talking about virtual reality versus renderings. Is the image up there of the daiquiri smart helmet is actually a photograph. It's not a rendering. And so what's really exciting about our product is that it is real. This is the 17th generation that's just come out right now, the Mark 17. That's still not up there. But at any rate, the interesting thing about it is I feel like we're probably the only company out there that is building a product that is specific to industrial applications. And because we're not focused on a consumer market, we're not trying to get a product out there, say Microsoft HoloLens, that's probably going to need to retail for well under $1,000 in order to exceed. In fact, the inertial measurement unit in our product is so advanced and at such an industrial grade, probably costs more than the HoloLens altogether. But what that means is that in real life, when you're out there, we're talking about like millimeter accuracy in terms of understanding where we are or where somebody is in time and space. And that ends up providing some really, really interesting aspects. Think of the concept of what we call 4D note. Now imagine a guy goes up on a power transformer to make a repair. Because the smart helmet knows exactly where he is in space and in time, he could go back and while he's up there, leave a note for a colleague. Another guy comes up 2 weeks later and he goes up with a smart helmet, and because that helmet knows exactly where he is in space, it'll pop up that note from his colleague that's sitting there in the cloud and give him information that he needs to do to make the necessary repairs. And as I mentioned over and over again, not only are we increasing productivity, which is great, and efficiencies, but if you're dead, that doesn't matter. And the fact is some of the safety applications that we're doing, I think, are going to be one of the primary drivers, especially in the construction industry.
Yeah. Ken, can you talk a little bit more about the helmet and how it works? I'm curious to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of it as a hard hat, and if we had that image up there, that would be really cool. But we don't. So think of it as essentially a hard hat that's ANSI OSHA certified and that's packed full of processors, cameras, and sensors. And so some of the things that we have in there is, as I just mentioned, an inertial measurement unit, which is total industrial grade down to millimeter accuracy. And then what we also do is we have stereoscopic monochromatic cameras in the front of the helmet that provide depth sensing and also visual navigation. And then that's also, of course, tied in with the GPS. So we have algorithms that basically triangulate between those 3 devices to be able to track out in the real world and accommodate for drift, which is really, really interesting. We also have a thermal imaging camera in there, and one of the applications of that would be, say, an electrician going into a control room looking for a problem. All of a sudden, they can see an anomaly that's going on without touching anything or even opening up a panel to see what's going on. Another application of that thermal imaging camera is, now imagine a guy's out in the field and he's actually not looking for a problem, but that camera's running in the background and can detect an anomaly and send an alert up and say, hey, look over here. We also have cameras in the back of the helmet. So while you may not be wanting to have eyes in the back of your head, those cameras can detect when all of a sudden there's a forklift backing up or another piece of heavy equipment coming your way. A very interesting aspect of that is I was just out at the Notre Dame Stadium construction project a month or two ago, and there are all the backup alarms going off all the time from construction equipment. We mentioned this to one of the guys that we were there with, and he said, "What alarms?" And the fact is, the guys out in the field tune this out because it's just that constant beep, beep, beep all day long. And so they aren't even actually hearing that. So that's another aspect of some of the what our technology does with the sensors all around. And that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So essentially, it's the hard hat of the future. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, let's call it the hard hat of the future. And I like to refer to the term what I call AI. Everybody's familiar with artificial intelligence, and everybody's scared of that, including Elon Musk, right? I like to refer to our product as augmented intelligence. And again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, being able to provide the right information at the right time in the right context to allow people to make the right decision.
Okay, thanks for sharing. All right, so you guys represent companies where some of your products are out in the market, some of them are still in testing, in alpha, in beta. What's it going to take for us to get from where we're at now to the future of using the products that are in testing? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I can take a shot. So we actually have multiple products right now in beta alpha stage. And typically what we see is first the industry has to be proactive, right? So we're seeing it in the industry, in the construction industry. Everybody sat on this panel, obviously looked at that industry and said, this industry is ripe for disruption, right? And I think that's the first approach, right? The second is you have to start small, right? There's really nothing to think about that I'm going to change this whole industry. But you can find use cases, you can find applications that actually are suitable for that particular pilot. So that's what we've seen, right? The sales cycle or whatever you want to call the adoption cycle now really requires you to bring in that trial, bring in that pilot, test it out, and then you start understanding the value of the data, the value of the process changes, and then that's when you pull it up into your business and say, we can actually change all of this. So I'll give you an example. The example you gave there about the hard hat camera actually detecting the forklift. Right now, what we're doing is not just taking the information coming from your hard hat to know that there's a forklift coming, it's actually being able to control that forklift, right? So we have pilots right now where we're actually controlling systems like that to make sure that you as a user don't really have to think about your environment anymore, right? You're instrumented because there's so much technology today. Right, it could be your wearable wristband, it could be your phone, it could be your handheld mobile computing, it could be anything you have. You have enough technology for us to know exactly what's going on with you. And there's enough technology around for us to actually preempt other systems, right? And so that's really the next phase where we all have individual technologies. How do you now start bringing it together? Because if you sit on the other side of the fence, the challenge is, where do I start from? There's so much technology to adopt, and it's really until you can show them that you can take the hard hat as well as the Iris Oculus, and you can drive value for your business. It's not just one technology. All these technologies are designed to actually work together. And so I think that's going to be the adoption curve that we're seeing. It's going to be individual pilots and then aggregated pilots, and then it changes the whole business.
Great, thanks for sharing. Shane, you look like you want to add to that.
And I think absolutely, we've seen that a lot of the either construction firms or design firms we're talking to right now are investigating a lot of new technology that's come out in the last year and a half, whether it's 3D scanning or virtual reality or new hardware, or really there's this whole spread of tech, and pretty universally it requires the hardware to catch up from a computational side. So we are fixated on the GPU, the graphics processing unit. It's either NVIDIA or AMD or Intel that is installed on all of these workstation machines that our customers are using. And a lot of what everyone's talking about here does require intensive processing. So from our perspective, it's a hardware adoption curve. Sort of the tech is starting to exist, especially in virtual reality. It's a little trickier, but NVIDIA and AMD are kind of in an arms race right now to roll out the best virtual GPUs. So that's getting there. But then on top of that, it's making sure that there's enough interoperability and enough compatibility with different technologies for sort of customers in this space where their livelihood does depend on the technology working as promised, to have it work across the board. And yeah, I totally agree that like Autodesk is now, they make AutoCAD and Revit and Maya and a whole suite of tools. I mean, they are even internally still trying to get all of their programs to work together. And that's just a small sample of how sort of scattered the industry is. And we need that to be a little more united and the speed of processing to be a little higher before a lot of this new tech really takes off.
And I think building off of that, just interoperability of technologies within the built environment is ever more important. You know, from a consultant standpoint, you know, we have to maintain our objectivity when we're recommending solutions to our clients on different technologies that are coming out. And there's so much innovation going on within the space, we have to really take a step back and evaluate it from a different perspective so that the clients and the buildings that they're going to be living in and occupying for the next 100 years is going to be really leveraging the technology for its strengths, but then also interoperating with other technologies that we're specifying at the same time. You know, it was talked about as far as data and analytics and real-time evaluation on what's going on. We're seeing that too in the built space with fault detection and diagnostics. It's becoming a very much more popular approach to solving problems on their day-to-day operation. And the only way that it really provides value back to the client and the owner or the operator of that building is if it's operating together with another technology. So it's ever more important that we find solutions that are integrated, that work together, and that does leverage all the data that's being produced by some of these systems. So.
Yeah, and I've heard the theme a few times now. It's so important that we work together. And so can you guys spend just a minute talking about what does that look like for you? How do you come together with other companies and, you know, just collaborate and figure out how that works together?
I'll actually take this stab at it, but it's interesting. So Ken and I must be the oldest because we think alike. But you know, he talked about the inefficiency in the building process versus manufacturing. Manufacturing is very unique because they generally come up with a concept, they design it, they build it, they support it. They care about the whole life cycle of the product. The building industry has been very disparate, right? Someone designs it, they don't really care how it's built. It gets built, they generally don't care how it's delivered. And I think where we're seeing, and even Built World selfishly, that's why we love the organization, is all those disciplines got to get together and work closer. And then what's going to adopt that is the efficiencies we talked about and safety. So now when we deliver buildings, we'll have sustainability, we'll have long-term, and I think that's where the technology is getting there. We're demanding more. Our customers and clients are demanding more. That those disciplines will have to start working together. And you actually, and the other challenge we have is sometimes the architect has to take more of a burden than they traditionally have in their design. But you're seeing that pushed on them by the owner. And so this technology, from a facility management perspective, long term, is going to start driving it, I think, down to the beginning, from my view of things.
You know, I'll chime in on that as well, despite how old Kevin and I may be, and how much we think together. And I think that's a really interesting point, you know, that Kevin brings up, because for a long time, especially in the U.S., there's been this huge chasm between architects and the guys who are actually on the ground. And I come from the space. I've worn out many pairs of steel-toe boots. I've had my own businesses. I've worked with everybody from Gensler to the local building inspector. And the fact is, there's just like this animosity almost between these two different groups, which is absurd. Most of the architects out there have never built anything in their lives, and they show up, excuse me if anybody out here is an architect, and they show up on the job site in their loafers and pad around for a day and take a look at what's going on. And meanwhile, the guys out in the field that are actually putting this stuff together have no idea what's going on, and they're just looking at what used to be at least a pretty abstract set of blueprints. We're finally getting into 3D, but I think one of the real opportunities to collaborate here, as Kevin's saying, is trying to close that gap. And one of the things we're really working with on is working with everybody from software companies to even tool manufacturers so that we can bridge that gap between the concept that the architect is trying to build and the guys who are actually out there with the tools putting the stuff together out there in the field. And I think that's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, so I can add to that. I mean, I think we asked the question, how can you collaborate? So one of the thinking on the Zebra side is we tell you that, look at those trends. I mean, we're seeing it. It's mobile, cloud, and, the Internet of Things. So what does that mean? It means, everybody now has enough computing power on their handheld. They have enough computing power with a mobile device they have, right? There's cheap cloud computing power, right? Which means you can now put things in the cloud, okay? And then you have the Internet of Things, which is really the concept that you have all the smart connected devices. So how do you now start taking advantage of that? There are a few things that help, right? So there's a concept of application programming interface, and that's what I spoke about. It's really a simple, open way for you to interact with anybody else's software. That's what Facebook, that's what Twitter does, right? They open up an API so you can write your own front-end application. So if you ask, all the developers out there building gaming, right? That's the value for them. They don't have to worry. They don't have to worry about, I need to know what the whole back end of Twitter is. They just access it through the API. So I think all of us on this panel, we're definitely thinking in that direction. We're building technology that's saying, listen, you can interact with my device. I'm going to make this API public. I'm going to publish it. You can access it. You can interact with it. So that's the first step, right? So anybody building new technology, new devices for that particular industry saying, okay, I don't have to know the fundamentals of the helmet, but I can access the information coming from that helmet and I can enrich a whole new experience, right? So I think that's going to drive it. The second is, there's really not going to be one standard, right? There's going to be multiple standards. So it's really ask yourself, what vertical are you? What industry are you? What is critical in that particular industry? OSHA, for example, right? If we build stuff for that industry, we have to respect the existing legacy devices, the existing legacy architecture that sits there. And so you build stuff that complies with those standards. So when new stuff comes in, it's not rocket science. So the guys that are living there say, well, this doesn't comply to OSHA. No, it does. So now it's just easy for you to do. So I think those are two things that on our side we definitely believe in, going with standards that are applicable to the particular vertical and then opening up an API type infrastructure where it's easy to interact with any device or application that exists there.
Building off of what Ken was saying a little bit ago about, an architect standing on a job site and his loafers not really knowing how the construction workers putting these two pieces of steel together. From a theoretical standpoint, he does, but there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think from our perspective, we're really focused on collaborating with developers at an early stage. So we're developing software tools that are web-based, that we're literally interacting on an instant basis on design decisions so that you can switch a parameter and really understand the effect that has on the global development of that urban plan or building if you're looking at a very granular level. And I think that it really is that's what's really driving the future, is being able to instantaneously in real time collaborate with different vendors, different stakeholders within the built environment throughout that process. And from an existing building standpoint, and what I'm really mainly focused on is providing energy efficiency for our built environment. And the main collaboration piece there, where the rubber meets the road, is the building operator, right? The chief engineer of that building has to be on board with design decisions and changes that you're making. Otherwise, they're just going to go back to their day one operation that they were doing before you came along. And it's really important to educate, I think, and have more of a collaborative conversation through the process. When we're talking about projects, whether it be new construction, urban planning, or existing building retrofits. So, we've talked about Internet of Things and data, and I think that's really what's going to drive and help our decision-making process as consultants and expertise in our industry down to the end user. The education is really where they're going to be brought up to speed, and really where the adoption of the technology is going to come to fruition. So.
It does kind of seem like it's from it's coming from two angles of like one's operations, like integrated project delivery, where like I mean, I saw this emerge in the firms I was working at with when they adopted 3D modeling and a tool like Revit, which allows essentially you build a 3D model from the start of the design and construction phase. And they also adopted some management practices that brought more people around the table earlier. And it was interesting to see sort of their adoption of a new software layer also like was in line with an adoption of an entirely new sort of management practice and operational practice. I think that's the good scenario. I've also worked at places where that doesn't happen. But then there's also the technology side. Like I mean, cloud has been in the last 3 years the work that some companies have done integrating different file formats so they work together online or work together in the same formats is a great way for sort of multiple parties to be able to see things that they normally couldn't otherwise and reconcile them all together. And then on top of that, there's file standards, which is a little more in the weeds, but there's been the emergence of IFC, FBX, let's even say OBJ, and this is sort of lower level, but it's formats that a lot of different technologies can work with, and like IFC, for example, has been a godsend for us because we can essentially get a lot of data out of file formats we wouldn't otherwise be able to pull from.
All right, thanks for sharing. Chris and Shane, you both hit on something that's kind of interesting to me. You talked about how the team really has to be on board. And I mentioned earlier that I work at Hard Hat Hub. What we do is we have a platform that matches great people with great jobs and great employers with great people. And so can you guys just share kind of what are those skill sets that are required to work on teams like yours to really help move us forward?
Sure. So our firm is made up of technologists, data scientists, engineers, and we're all trying to drive forward business. And it's not always the easiest thing to do when you have a bunch of tech geeks, running a company. And I think that the main thing that we're driving forward is collaboration. Meeting with every team and just understanding the deliverables for the technology side of things, from the engineering aspect, to really drive the solution as an integrated professional service back to our client. And really the collaboration and the effective communication is really the necessary skill set for that. So we don't really want our product to have to be learned. We want it to be fairly invisible. We're focusing on design to start. So in a designer's workflow, we want them to use Iris and to not really think about it. I mean, you could say like when you copy and paste a file, you sort of have that built in, right? It's that simple. And the reason I'm mentioning that is it requires that we build a fairly interesting team we have these low-level requirements, so we have some fairly low-level programmers and software engineers, but then additionally, we're looking for people that also understand design workflows and understand construction workflows and understand how someone actually creates models and creates essentially 3D data in their day-to-day workflows. And so what we get is we have a architectural engineer PhD in-house right now. We have a couple of advisors that are in the design fields in New York. We have a couple of people that have worked at SketchUp or we're working closely with Vectorworks right now. And we're trying to put together teams that not only understand essentially the design and construction process, but can also code. And that has been a very unique challenge.
Anybody else? Okay. Adebayo, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think on the Zebra side, we take a different approach slightly because we think the change is coming, right? It's about the process. It's about the change that's happening in that environment. So you take all of us, I'm sure all of us complain about our IT because we have better technology at home, right? In my house, I know what the Wi-Fi looks like. I know the speed I get, the mobile computing unit I have, the tablets I have. And then you go into the work environment, and they're really trying to limit you to use a particular type of system. Okay, the reality is IT can't really stop you that much anymore, right? Because it's coming. I mean, we've seen the adoption of what's happening. So from a design perspective, as we build new products, be it the physical hardware, the software that sits on it, we think of the consumer environment. We think of everything we use every day. So if you go to a construction site and you actually hand out a new mobile computing unit to the construction site manager, and it looks and feels like what he plays with when he's at home, he's actually more comfortable adopting that technology, right? Versus what we did, and Zebra's, we've been here for 40 years. So we've done mobile computing units that had this green terminal screens, and the cursor you had to move, and the keyboard was not very nice. And people at home were used to a touch screen on their iPad, right? So we've had to change that. We've had to build new devices that have that same look and feel. So when I pick it up, I'm saying, wow, okay, this feels like what I do at home. And then now, going back to your point, it's not really thinking about the technology they're using anymore. It now boils down to the experience. How easy is it for me to actually access information? How easy is it for me to share this data? How easy is it for me to take advantage of the data that's coming? So that's kind of what we're seeing. We think the industry itself, and again, we're seeing the new Gen Y generation, that's what's going into the workforce. And that's what they used to, right? So I think it's on both sides, right? Obviously, the resource on the construction side need to adopt new technology, be comfortable with what's coming. But I think on the construction side, for us building new equipment, we have to build with the notion that people expect what they do every day at home.
Yeah. So many of us here are, we're really interested in technology. Hello. Okay. We're here at Techweek. Some of us might not be in the built environment industries. Is this one better? All right, I'm just going to talk loud. Okay, so a lot of us here might not be involved in construction, engineering, architecture. What is exciting about working in this industry?
It's the real world.
Well, again, I don't know if it's industry specific, but I think especially, I guess maybe go back to it in this particular industry because there is so many opportunities to improve, right? I think overall you got to be excited in life about technology, right? I mean, if you're not enjoying that, you're missing out on what's happening in our world right now. But I think in this particular environment, there's so much to improve on. There's so much to do better. And that's what we want to do, right? In our lives, we want to be better, but in our processes, and there's very few industries. I mean, manufacturing's gotten very efficient, and again, they're doing things better, don't get me wrong. But I think in this realm, why it's so exciting is there's so many opportunities to do things better. I mean, saving lives, making better decisions. Even from a hospital perspective, there's a lot of enhancements that it will bring to us as we do better.
Yeah, again, I'll just add, it's really that technology, right? The technology's coming in and you're saying, I can do better. And so in the construction industry, I mean, it's always been an exciting industry because you're really designing things that are new, that are very different, right? And they stand the test of time. They're there for a long time. But now to take technology to really make that even more exciting, I'm pretty excited about it.
So from our perspective, we've recently found out that in 2007, there's been, for the first time ever, more people living in urban environments than in suburban environments. And the UN predicts that by 2050, over 70% of our population around the entire globe will live in urban environments. For us, that presents a world of opportunity, but also a world of challenges. And I think it's really the application of technologies as we move forward from this day into 2050, and really providing the solutions that are going to work, that are going to help recreate our infrastructure, because our infrastructure today isn't designed for 70% of our population to live in urban environments. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think that's what's the most exciting part. Traditionally, the AEC industry, not necessarily from the architecture, engineering, or even construction standpoint, but it's really the built environment itself is a laggard to the adoption of technology. And that's because really they're built structures that last over 100 years. And as you guys know, the technology adoption cycle, it goes through an R&D stage, it goes through its infancy and through its maturity. Some last and some die. And I think that we, as consultants, need to be aware of that as we move forward. And it's all very exciting. It's a lot of innovation happening. So.
I think a key piece, kind of what Ken said, is the real world. So traditionally, we're used to hardware and software that Shana brought up, where they're kind of catching up to one another. Well, now we're at a point where we're using these peripheral devices to basically help us see and understand what things are going to happen, how things are going to look to that extent. And where we're at 2 years ago to where we are now, it's vastly different. So I think the thing is, every few months something comes out, from anybody here, whether it's us directly or another person, and it's trying to take that technology and is it right for our clients or our industry? And I think that's the exciting piece, is that we're not slowing down, things are speeding up.
Yeah, and to sort of hop on two of those comments, the industry's far behind, so it does feel like there's a lot to catch up on, and it's very rewarding because there's a lot needed. But I think the reason people are very invested in something that's actually going to be real and built, and it's very satisfying to work at a tech company where at the end of the day, pretty much everything that you touch let's fast forward 5 years, will either have stayed in the design phase or have been built. And a lot of these projects terminate in real life, like it's real. And it's incredibly satisfying to be part of that process and try to improve that. And to piggyback on that too, I think there's also, I'm going to sound super cheesy here, but it's one of the few industries where there still is a level of craft that is handed down from, let's say, generation to generation, where there's skill sets that are sort of working with your hands, and you can't, technology is going to help you in all the other stages, but at the end of the day, someone has to build it. And I think that it creates a really interesting dynamic between technology and what's actually getting built.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think like you guys have said, we are all affected by the built environment, by what the architects design, what the construction industry is building, what the engineers are figuring out. So there's something that is inherently exciting about the industry just because of that and getting to have an impact in that. Great. So something else that's kind of come up is the idea of the gaming industry and how that plays into virtual reality and rendering and kind of, spans across what all of us are involved in. And I'm curious to hear from you guys how the gaming industry is impacting, what's happening out there right now for construction and the built environment.
So we've taken the gaming industry, the whole concept of the avatar. So if you're a gamer, you typically play games and you have an avatar online. We're building a platform. It's called Zatar, which is really Zebra Avatar. And the concept behind it is we believe that every connected device out there is going to have a virtual page in the cloud. So I'll break it down. If you think of the forklift in a warehouse, that forklift will virtually have a digital representation of itself in the cloud. Okay, and what that allows you to start doing is allows multiple front-end applications to easily interact with that avatar, right? So now you're controlling the forklift via its avatar, right? So that's one of the concepts we've taken from the gaming industry. And so when you think about it, you can now start creating complex avatars. So I can be on a job site, I have my helmet, which has its own avatar, but I'm also wearing, a wearable, my boots are connected. Now I have a complex avatar of that single individual. But it's so easy now because that avatar has its space in the cloud, and it's easy for all the front-end applications to actually interact with it. So that's one of the concepts we've taken, and we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, one of the things, is this working? Yeah? Okay. One of the things that we're doing that's actually really cool is kind of applying game mechanics to augmented work instructions. And if we had the video up here, you could actually see an example of a guy going through a process of opening and closing valves to do a filter change, and having this layer of data overlaid right over that, over his actual processes, and helping guide him through that. And one of the things we're looking at is ways where we can help incentivize people to actually go through the steps correctly, and maybe kind of in even a multiplayer game kind of aspect. One other aspect that I think is really interesting about gaming, as it relates to the AEC industry, is one of the things that I've been seeing as I'm talking to actually a lot of the unions and some of the training organizations for these groups, is that the young folks that are coming out of schools and stuff have been playing games all their lives, and there's no way for them to do this currently within any of these trades. So there's this huge attrition going on within the trades, I think due in part because there is no technology that's kind of integral to the way that they've grown up with technology. And so I think that's something that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, and hopefully we can help improve that situation.
So on the gaming technology, kind of where Ken had picked up about saying multiplayer games. So an avenue to think about that is traditionally on our side, on the design viz side, is we've always said, the game technology is great, you have all these devices, but the visualization aspect wasn't there. Well, that kind of changed a couple years ago, and now the game technology actually has the good visualizations as what we're used to producing as still renderings. And as a piece to that, with multiplayer games and Oculus, you can think of this as doing a WebEx or a GoTo meeting. So take it to a level where you have a virtual environment in a game engine, and you could have, let's say a hospital. So you have people across the country that are working on the project, and people could basically put on Oculus or various headsets, be in the game, and one person is controlling it, just like a WebEx, and the designer or us basically are moving things in real time for them. So they can say, what, that OR table is not right, we need to do a different one. So in a matter of minutes, we can change it out and everybody sees it. But instead of one person being in there, it's multifaceted. That's where things are, to me, heading with this stuff. But again, this is all very new, and the big thing I don't think we've mentioned is with Oculus is it's still a development kit. It's not out there. Daiquiri is out there. It's a product. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is still in development and beta, as we said. So I think, again, as we approach and the months and years come on, there's going to be a vast way of how we do things similar to what we're doing now, but with the newer technology.
Yeah, and so go ahead, Shane.
And the last thing is gaming tech has been really, it's excellent at optimizing, and in architecture and construction and in sort of the tech world and these professions, files have sort of historically been hilariously hard to work with, and things break and crash, and it's a general nightmare. And one thing in the last 2 years I've seen with something like, let's say, Navisworks, which is essentially a game engine that Autodesk has rolled out, is you get clever ways to have things work better. And I'm like, that's totally an oversimplification, but it has sort of had, and there's tools like Lumion and Navisworks and Reviz2 that have found ways to have bigger sets of data run better, and that's really significant as technology improves.
So while we're on the topic of gaming, are there any games out there that you think are particularly inspirational or you could grab ideas from for the built environment? For instance, I know how big Minecraft is. I've got 2 boys and they love playing Minecraft, and it's really interesting, and they're actually learning a lot through this game. Like when they dig into the ground and find, the different elements, iron, and what you can make from iron. And so I'm just curious to hear from you guys if you are in tune with the gaming industry, are there particular games out there that you think could help move our industry forward?
I have to laugh. So I don't know a particular game, but I have a daughter who is 11 and downloaded an app. I did not know it was there, where she created basically a walking mannequin, right? So it's pretty amazing. Again, I don't have a specific, but how they think. And that's really just a gaming engine that's creating content, right? And so it was it really was amazing. At 12 years old, she downloaded this app because she knows I do visualization at work and some other things. And literally, she created a mini cartoon of 2 people crashing together, much like, I know I'm going to date myself, we used to do stick figures at the end of books and flip them, right? Now they're doing digitally. So I don't have a particular one, but it's funny you asked the question because it really is relevant. Our kids are learning differently today, and that interactivity, it's amazing what they can do.
Yeah, well, and I think it's that kids are willing to spend 30 hours making a house in Minecraft was sort of, I think, a big discovery that, Microsoft, I think, bought Minecraft. I should check that. Yes, of course, Microsoft bought Minecraft. But it was amazing that it had such traction in, 5 to 15-year-olds. And as a result, in the last 2 years, there's been about 1 million sort of world creation tools that have come out since then. And they're interesting because most don't have goals, most don't have any purpose besides just design and creation, and they are some of the most popular games out there. So, I mean, yeah, I don't have any specific games, but that trend is very interesting that it's enabling a lot of people for CAD, and it's exciting to see that.
Yeah. So, one of the things about technology is it just changes so rapidly. And I'm curious to hear from you guys, whoever wants to pick up this question. From when you kind of started working in the built environment or started at your company with your product, what are some of the changes you've seen in a short amount of time or a long amount of time, depending on how long you've been with, kind of in your role? And whether your technology is out there in the marketplace or not, I know that rapid change can happen even in that beta or alpha stage. So what are some of those kind of shifts that you've seen or growths and developments?
So from our perspective as consultants, we're not only using technology and different software suites and packages for our end product to our clients, but we're also specifying and designing technology solutions for our clients. So from either end, there's been a lot of change and a lot of process change that we have to go through internally. So, when we're going from AutoCAD, for instance, and designing in a 2D environment, and everybody's proficient, and most of the people that are baby boomers in the industry are familiar with working in CAD, we move to a three-dimensional environment such as Revit. It becomes really a big challenge for us to establish new processes and really understand if we're designing the same type of product for our end users and our clients. So that's a huge challenge, and working through those processes and streamlining that is something that we face challenges with every day. As far as the technology on the other end of the spectrum that we're recommending and specifying for our clients, I think that the most difficult part is really vetting out the solutions and really understanding if those technologies are going to live the life of the building, or at least for the next 15 to 20 years, because we all know that laptop computers and computers that we have at home, desktops, their lifespan is anywhere between 5, maybe 6 to 10 years, but typically you're replacing that. So when we're installing building automation systems or specifying those for buildings, we have to keep in mind that there might be a next wave of technology coming in a year from now, and you guys maybe should hold off until this technology is out there. And just knowing and understanding those presents challenges that we face on the specifying side as well. So.
I think one of the things that's really cool is the rate at which we can iterate today. And, there's this concept of using technology to build technology now. And, much to what Kevin's been talking about here with 3D printing and stuff. At Daiquiri, at our headquarters in Los Angeles, we also have an office in Mountain View in Ireland. But we have our own 3D printers, some big guys, and our own in-house optics. And electronics labs, and that's allowed us to go, as I mentioned here, to what we call our Mark 17, which is the 17th iteration of our product in just under 2 years. And if you think about that, that would have been impossible to have happened probably even just, 4 or 5 years ago. So that's something that's super exciting.
Yep. In the last year, we've had 5 virtual reality headsets sort of go through our office that we've thought about supporting, and those are 5 new ones. Like it's insane right now in terms of new technology coming out. It's a very fast pace. With the announcement of Microsoft's HoloLens and Magic Leap, there's augmented reality on the horizon for more a consumer-facing product, and I think that's going to yet again sort of change the landscape of things that you're going to put on your body and use day to day. And then on top of that, there is 3D scanning technology that's been talked about a little bit, but also on the consumer side with like Google Tango, which is a smartphone that is going to have scanning sensors. Sort of all of these have come out in the last 2 years, or been announced in the last 2 years, and God, I think that's amazing because it's already changed the landscape of what companies are filing patents for. And I mean companies like Iris that have sprung up literally just based on new tech that's happened in the last year or 2.
Anybody else? Thoughts? Okay. Well, so I'm curious to hear how, for those of you that are in the market and have customers, how are they embracing your technology? Are they asking you to, kind of focus on themes of sustainability, or obviously, ROI is a big one, but how does that work with getting your product or your clients and customers, and what are you seeing from them as we progress? Are they starting to ask more about or become more interested in technology and what you have to offer?
So it varies. I think that different industries, if you look at retail, for example, retail's heavily being driven by us, the consumers, right? The behavior we have. So you take omni-channel, for example, I expect to go online, shop, find what I want, make sure I can pick it up at the closest store next to my house. So the retailer is asking themselves the question, what do I need to do to be able to keep my business, right? So they're the ones actually coming and saying, listen, what do we need to do? That this, Amazon is disrupting us if they're traditional brick and mortar. Healthcare, for example, it's again being driven by the standards. And there's so much standard and technology going into that space where they're saying, oh, we need to change how we're doing it. And then I think the most important one though is the startups, right? So I mean, people on this seat are looking at it and saying, I want to disrupt that business. Why do I have to build like this? Why does it take me years to make this change? And so you have this really, really smart set of people that are saying, I want to disrupt that business. So for the legacy guys, and that's why Zebra is here, right? So if we just decide to do what we've been doing for 40 years, we're not going to exist in 10 years. It's as simple as that. And so a lot of the legacy companies are also asking themselves the question, well, I see all the startups. I see all this VC funding going into really great ideas. What do I need to do? So I think it's a combination of things. I'm excited about the startup world because, again, I think they're the ones that they're really seeing it differently. A lot of the legacy businesses, they've been doing it the same way, and they're comfortable with that. And it's typically, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But then someone shows up in your doorstep and saying, well, you really don't want to do it like that. And they get all of us to move away from just standing by the side of the road, hailing a cab, to using our smartphone to call the cab, right? And nothing really changes, but it's a new experience, right? So from an end user perspective, we want to act differently, we want to behave differently. So I think that's what's driving it.
I think, outside of the AEC industry, everybody's taking, solutions and efficiencies very seriously and using data analytics to do that. And we're ready, and we're really driving data analytics within the AEC industry, both from a new development standpoint, urban planning standpoint, and an existing building standpoint. And I think that the case studies that we're developing and that other consultants around the world are developing for this is really driving the end user to want to talk about it more and to really understand it. I think for the past 5 years, we've probably been in that early adopter stage, and we're really finally crossing the chasm to get to a point where people know and understand the technologies that are available for the built environment and are wanting to talk about it more.
I think there's a couple key points. So to bring up, it does depend on the client first and foremost. I think 3 key words that come up with every client is educating them.
Sorry, George.
The adoption.
George, real quick, can you switch microphones? It's hard to hear you. Thanks.
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying it's similar. Each client's going to be different. Whether it's a large client, hospitals, we get people in and they love the technology, but then by the time it goes up the food chain, they basically don't think it's a good idea, or it's the old school and they don't want to do it anymore. The key piece, though, is education, adoption, and disruption. So if you can kind of get through those 3 things to any of these clients, they're more willing to try new technology and try it within their process for whatever the design is. Whether it's a building, whether it's doing a retail store, trying to bring clients to a retail store. The key piece is a lot of these guys tend to see the technology on a commercial and advertisement, but they don't understand it. And I think that education is the biggest key function. Is that technology right for them at this point in time? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I think that's where we kind of come into play and explain this to these, to the clients, that X technology going to work great for you. Y technology, it's not quite there yet.
You've tapped on sort of a big thing that I think a lot of us have to do, which is the in-person demo. Like a lot of our technology is experiential. And from our customer standpoint, in the first 4 months of our company, we showed about 500 architects and designers in person. And it was primarily just traveling every day, going to a new office. And that has been probably the key reason we had traction early on, was actual in person, in face, actually putting the goggles on someone. And then what we're seeing now with adoption is there are a lot of designers out there that want to validate their designs sort of in the early stages. So if instead of looking at a floor plan, it's much easier to convince someone to, say, put in a skylight that's going to cost more if they can walk through and see the light hitting the wall and see that it brings in, more natural light into the space. And so experiential demos can also help validate a lot of choices, and that's gotten us a lot of early users.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. So we're here at the Tech Toy Chest, obviously, and our time is going to wrap up soon. Curious, for each of your technology, what has been an exciting project you've been on with it, or an exciting experience you've had, or kind of an exciting experiment that you've run if your technology's not out in the market yet? I'd love to hear just a little bit from each of you.
Let's see. We've seen about a 36% reduction in assembly time for a person to go through a particular process on the first go, and a 96% reduction in error rate on the first go of a process, and on the second time around, 100% reduction or complete elimination of error rate in someone going through an assembly process. So,
and can you explain assembly process, what you mean by that?
Yeah, that was somebody going in and putting together an assembly of a mechanical component for a company that I can't talk about.
Highly confidential.
So I would say two things. Again, I'll take 3D printing out of it because there's probably more in manufacturing. But I think because I got a manufacturing background, some of the cool things we've done over the last year is a project up in Madison where they're scanning the building after it's done and comparing it to what it was designed as. And why I find that so interesting is because manufacturing has done it. Again, trying to catch up with that efficiency. So we're able to take that scan data and overlay it to the model and see how it's done. The other one that was kind of interesting, we actually scanned the F-16 and think about what happens to the plane over the iterations. And they're trying to jam all this new technology in a cockpit. And it's really hard to go in there and measure it. So we were actually able to scan the plane, and then they can take that and retrofit it with actual dimensions. So just kind of a cooler project. It's not as dynamic as these guys, but it's very cool that it's happening today, that we can improve processes.
I think on our side, what has probably been the most exciting part for us is, you typically go to the customer, you want to talk about this whole new technology, and, you're 40 minutes into your presentation, you're talking about how exciting it is, and they tell you, wait, stop. Okay, if you can really do that, this is what we want to do. And it's been really revolutionary because it's, you think you know what the business actually wants, but when you get there, they look at your technology and they can immediately visualize how different they want to do it. So 2 key examples. We've been doing active RFID for a long time. So active RFID, it's a battery type tag. We've been using it in industrial manufacturing and tracking, vehicle assets. And we had a partner that looked at it and immediately said, this would be great for the NFL. And I mean, we're an industrial company. We've never really played with the NFL. And so we go through this trial period and work with the NFL. And NFL says, wow, this is really accurate because you can get sub 6 inches accuracy on how fast the play is going. So we could get XY coordinates.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more about how the NFL was using it?
Yeah, so basically the NFL uses it right now to track players in-game. So each player has 2 NFL RFID tags on their shoulder pads, and our system can track how fast they're going in sub 6 inches. So we get XY coordinates of each player. We then pull that data, put it in the cloud, and then push it to broadcast. So last season, if you watched NFL on Thursday, you typically see an NFL player where they show you the breadcrumbs and how fast he's going. And so that was totally different. I mean, we never designed the technology for that concept, and it worked. And so the next step was one of the largest aircraft manufacturers, looked at the NFL solution and said, you know what? We have a safety problem because we have so many cranes that are actually automated and they keep moving around, and we don't know when they're moving around. And so the implementation became, okay, we'll tag each of those automated robots, and we could shut them down once they were within 6 inches of each other. And so this year we actually got an award as Supplier of the Year because this is the first time in their history where they had 0 incidents based on that. So it's just so exciting where you take a technology, you think you understand how the user's actually going to use it, but then they turn around and tell you, no, that's not what we want to do. If you guys can really do that, this is what we want to do. So for us, that's been really exciting.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I had no idea that, the NFL was using your technology, and and then when you talk about the safety of cranes and all of that, that is really exciting. Chris.
So from a design engineering perspective, we always are putting out designs for new construction projects, and the goal and the theory is that it gets built and it gets operated the same way that we designed it and intended to operate. But the real world never works that way, and in fact, buildings operate traditionally at like 15 or 20% higher energy consumption rate when it's built day one after commissioning takes place, and it kind of operates that into the future. One of the most exciting projects that I've been a part of recently is looking at a building stock from the 1960s, having the original design documentation, figuring out how they're operating today, and really driving that operation back to the original design intent through data analytics, through utilizing the Internet of Things, smart devices all throughout the building. Beyond temperature sensors and humidity sensors for comfort, we're looking at all the major assets of equipment in the building as well, and really driving that efficiency back to its original design intent. Once we get it there, and we're saving energy in that space, we can build that money back into future projects to get creative and understand new ways to operate the building beyond the original design. We're experiencing that with some of our existing building clients, but we're also trying to push that concept onto our new development and new construction clients so that they understand the importance of really maintaining the design of a project from day one through the operation.
Thanks for sharing, Chris.
So I'd say the biggest thing for us is that our clients are seeing the technology and loving it and utilizing it. So a couple, points I could bring up is a couple large clients we have, they're seeing the case for the virtual reality and the augmented reality where they love it for the design because they can see what it is, but now they're taking it to a different aspect and saying, could we take this and now show our donors? Right, so if you're building an arena or if you're building something on a campus, we can take these donors, let them see what this wing is going to look like, this floor, and let them decide if they want to donate sooner rather than later so they get the money faster. Another aspect is we're cutting design charrette time. Typically in architecture, that can be anywhere from weeks to months. So we're condensing that, let's say, from weeks to a couple days or from months to a couple weeks. So that's a big time and cost savings for them because they're able to come in and see everything. And if we make changes in day one, by day two, they already have those changes and they can walk through the space, see the different elements that they wanted to change or add because of that. And then a third piece that we've talked about a little, but augment reality. So another key piece that we've used that for is augment typically in the lowest level format. You can create a marker basically, kind of like a scan code. And you can make that marker whatever you want, but for a couple of our clients, they have their own yearly shows where they bring in, like for restaurants, for instance, if they have franchisees, all their partners and everything, if they're going to show off a new prototype, instead of showing traditional plans or a rendering, they can hand out this little card and they can actually look at the prototype with their phone or their tablet and spin around the entire prototype and zoom in and see what the new prototype's going to look like.
That's really exciting. Thanks for sharing, George.
For us, probably about 9 months into the company, we were pre-launch. We hadn't really sent anything out into the world. That was our own work. We had done some custom projects, but we hadn't actually sent out our app. And at month 10, we launched, and we were getting we'd get a photo in of someone we'd never met, putting the goggles on their client and using it in a design presentation. And we were kind of like, no, it's alpha, don't use it for your clients yet, use it internally. But it was a really exciting time to actually see sort of what was being worked on in-house start being used for the sales process for designers and for even internal reviews at firms and such. That was very memorable. And we're about to cross 2,000 applicants in our beta system now too. So that's another big benchmark that we're probably going to hit tomorrow. So we're excited about that.
Very, very exciting. So we're going to open up the floor in just a minute for Q&A. So start thinking of those questions for our panel. We've heard about a lot of things in the last hour and a half or so. We've talked about the built environment and the relationship between architecture and construction and how sometimes there can be some tension. We've talked about how the industry can be really siloed and we need to come together, which is exactly what Built Worlds does and exists for, which is awesome. And then we've talked about the gaming and how that's been an inspiration and we can learn from that. I really appreciate all that you guys have brought. We have a really diverse panel, everything from focusing on one particular product that is impacting the built environment, like the future of the hard hat and Daiquiri's helmet, goggles, all the way to kind of what positive energy practice does, which is a broader focus. And so I just really want to thank you guys for being here, and I appreciate all that you've brought. Before we give them a round of applause, I am going to open up the floor. Are there any questions out there that you guys have that you want to ask any of our panelists? And it's going to be it's kind of hard to see because these lights are bright. So if you do, just shoot your hand up there. And Matt, if I don't see anybody, will you help me? Yeah. All right, thanks. Questions? Anybody? Yes.
You guys mentioned something about the building process in creating prototypes or, I know the guy in the green, he mentioned something about creating a prototype using samples and technology that's already created to create and using other applications to create whatever it is that you want. And then once you get to that process, how there's other IT technology systems that might be able to make it work better. I wanted to know, at what point do you start getting partners or start building forums and things of that nature so that you can make sure that you get the end product that you really want?
Okay, so I think you have to start from the right beginning, right? So if you look at the environment today, it's very collaborative. Like the platform we're building is all open source, which means we contribute to the standard and then other people contribute to it. So I think if you're looking at new technology and trying to implement something that's very disruptive to the traditional industry, you have to bring in the players really early on, right? I think some of the times, they're the ones that will help you understand what that adoption means for your traditional business and how best to actually make that adoption. You have to control it because it's your process, right? So even if you bring us in, for example, I have to understand what your process is, right? Technology is only an enabler, right? So don't let technology drive your business because at the end of the day, you know your business best, right? So think of technology as enabling that process. What can you automate? What can you now start having visibility to? What can you share with either all the partners or your ecosystem. And that's really what it's about. But I would recommend that you bring in the people as early as possible within the process.
I would agree with that, but I would also say the thing that, say in our case, where we're committing to a physical production or production of a physical product, you want to make sure you do a lot of user testing as well, so that, as I mentioned, we're on the 17th iteration of just the form factor of our product. And before you're going to commit to, say, the incredible costs of mold technology for injection molding of the final run of the product, you better make sure it's going to fit on everybody's head that's going to be putting it, and that all your parts are going to fit in there.
Anybody else? Okay. Are there any other questions out there? How do you make sure you're protected in the process of doing your research?
So it's kind of built on what you just said, but I think anytime you're innovative, right? And again, you look at these guys and girls again, you almost got to trust somewhat. I don't think all of us overlap in some way, shape, or form. But if you're going to be truly innovative, you got to pull those partners in and don't look at it as competitors, and really share that data. It's always a concern, right, to give up your intelligence and that type of thing. But if you're going to be innovative, at least I feel, for it to really progress, you got to share some information and just find those right partners. But I think, again, you look at the panel and again, we may overlay in certain things, but they're going to reach out to each of us to work on things. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I've worked with George for a long time, and sometimes we have good projects, and sometimes we don't bring him anything. But I think there's some risk involved. I mean, there's legal, contractual cases in certain aspects. But I think in others, you just got to find the right partner and be open, because you got to understand the processes.
It's why the lawyers make the big bucks.
At a very high level, we really early on, we were wondering if we fly under the radar or really reach out and do we tell everyone our idea or do we tell no one our idea? And I think we did get the right advice, just saying, yes, tell everyone you work the network. No one has enough time to steal your idea. No one has enough money to steal your idea. You guys have already put in a couple months and you've devoted your lives to it. Just share. And I think it depends on what you're getting into, but for the most part, it was very good advice. Don't worry about signing NDAs and contracts if it's the first meeting. Just get the ideas out there and start working together.
At the end of the day, it's also about what the market has to say about your product. So, you're not going to succeed if you're either not only too late, but too early. The fact of the matter is, a lot of times when there is a really good idea out there, and this sounds like kind of hippie stuff, but it's out there in the universe, and a lot of other people are thinking about it at the same time. And in fact, I think it was Bill Gates got up, 10 years before the iPad with a touchscreen device, and nobody cared. Nobody cared at all. 10 years later, Steve Jobs comes into it, and everybody's like, oh my God, he's brilliant.
All right, guys. Thanks for sharing that. Question over here.
Thanks, Christina. I'm Rob McManamy with Built Worlds, and this is a little bit gratuitous, not gratuitous, but self-serving, because we also have a Smart Worlds initiative going on. And since we have such knowledgeable folks on stage, one of you earlier talked about the demographics that are going to fill cities incredibly. That I guess already the populations in cities now are greater than outside of cities, and that's only supposed to increase over the next 20 to 50 and 100 years or so. Where do you see your products helping in the functionality, I guess, of those future crowded cities? Are we going to be able to, will smart helmets help? I guess you talked about safety and stuff in that regard, since it's all going to be so congested. But I just wanted to open that question up to the group a little bit for the applications of these smarter future cities and how your products might, anybody wants to feel that, might contribute to that.
Sure. So from a building perspective, buildings and the infrastructure, the pipelines that kind of come into a city really make up the infrastructure. I think that it really comes down to the intelligence level of the structures that are within the city, right? So there's ideas about smart grid, and a lot of people talk about demand response with the smart grid. Buildings that can use a smart grid are only the ones that are the most intelligent, that have the sophisticated control technology within the building to be able to leverage, a signal from ComEd or from Exelon saying that you guys need to turn down your power. I think it's ideas like that that really need to progress and more technology be put into these smart buildings and smart infrastructure to be able to understand how taxing our existing infrastructure is for more populace to move into the cities. Furthermore, I think that it's really a behavioral thing. They say that the way that people live in the urban environment is the most sustainable way to live, as opposed to being in the suburban environment. We use and share resources in much the same way as crowdsourcing does for Kickstarter and those types of Uber even. You're really sharing the resources that are available in the urban environment, and I think that it's really leveraging the technology that's going to be coming about in the new innovative ways to be able to share things more collectively, because resources are going to become scarce, and that's sort of what we're going to run into, I think, in the near future.
I think data as well with city and urban planning, specifically with simulations for disaster relief. I've seen some amazing earthquake models of Seattle. I've seen some amazing flooding models of New York, and I've seen sort of urban designs as a result of those simulations. And I think that is only going to get more detailed and more accurate, and that will really influence how we develop.
Great. I think I saw a few more questions. Anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, and this is kind of, it's a question, but it's kind of like just in theory, because a lot of your systems are kind of like the higher edge in society, but it is based on data collected from the workers. Like I'm actually from Mississippi. I have experience with people in construction or shipbuilding, and then I'm now kind of in technology. So I have like a realm of experience from different. I've worn hard steel-toe boots and hard hats before. Let me tell you. But I see there is a pushback from people. There's even different color hard hats. If you're a white hat, there's a different way people will treat people with hard hats with white hats and different things. So my question kind of is like, what is the technique to alleviate the pushback? I think because a lot of it's dependent on how you introduce a technology to the people who you're trying to get it to reach, and a lot of it's based on the data. Could you say it's based on user data? A lot of it, and even with the buildings and the like in other countries, you would have to get it. Like, I mean, I lived in the Philippines for some time. There's highest population in the world, and it has a huge need for infrastructure. How could you get the data from these areas if the people won't use it? Like, is there a plan? Like, are you trying to connect with different governments, or is there kind of, like, I feel like a lot of this is you get this tiny bit of data from this control group. Is there a group, or are you kind of, because they're so, I guess it's alpha, and I guess because there's no real, you have such a small group of people you're testing it on, but it could have such a huge impact in the world. So is there a way to use this technology in different areas, I guess is my question.
Okay, so I am curious to hear from you guys. Just to summarize, are you, is the testing group or the people that you've that have experienced your product, would you say that it's kind of broader or narrow? And if it's narrow, how can we bring that to a broader audience? Is that the question? Okay. Yeah. Anybody?
I think that just kind of happens naturally with most technology that we see out there. Way back in the day when the concept for the first home computer came out, probably the majority of people out there, including some very smart folks at some what were considered technology companies back then, said, well, nobody's ever going to use this. And the concept of everybody having a computer at home was absolutely laughable. So I think it just kind of happens naturally, and it's something that we've seen at a much more rapid pace with smartphones. And I think what will happen in the case of our technology is we're going very, very kind of narrow and deep, if you will, compared to, say, a consumer play. But as that technology advances and continues to improve, it'll actually find all sorts of ways that it'll spread out on a very broad level and in lots of different form factors.
Maybe I'll build off that because I think, again, it is that evolution. You got to start with the innovative group to play down. But I do think you'll see certain technologies, if I was understanding the question right, for more not as advanced cultures or locations. And I think not only will you see the innovation up here, but there will be specific ones to help that. Like if you look at, again, I didn't talk about it, but 3D printing, and it's not a product we have, but they actually make a large-scale 3D printer that builds walls of the home. In China, I think they built 8 structures in a matter of 24 hours. So I think you're going to see 2 sets of technologies, right? You'll see the more advanced here, and it's going to play down. You'll always got the laggards, but you will see other technologies that maybe we're not talking about that also address those challenges, and it just might be a different subset, but you'll see some of those innovations as well that maybe we didn't touch on.
Yeah. I was going to add, I think, a current example to that whole idea, the evolution of, a really expensive product kind of focused at a population that can afford an expensive product is the idea of Tesla. So, they have really expensive cars. Their Powerwall, though, is at a price point where it can be, can reach a broader audience and can really help some of those countries that are still developing. So I do think, it's a natural process. Any other questions? All right. I can't see that side of the room. Do we have any? Okay. Well, Matt Abels is going to come up really quick and say a word about Built Worlds, which I am really appreciative to, particularly because they have sponsored this event and brought this awesome panel together. So before Matt comes up, can you join me in thanking our panelists with a round of applause, please?